Welcome to today's edition of Pipeline Things. We get into talking about Emat and catch and release. And next, did you get it? Did you get it? And trying to kill the bot. You have to watch the whole episode to get any of that or what it means. We hope you enjoy it, and we certainly did. Thanks for joining us. All right, welcome to this Wednesday's edition of Pipeline Things. I am your host, Thing 20, otherwise known as Rhett Dotson. Super excited to be here with you. And my co-host, Thing 21, otherwise known as Christopher DeLeon, not lesser in prominence, lesser in stature, but greater in number, whatever that means now, 21 verse 20. Chris, man.
I think it's number of arm wrestling wins. Anyways, we'll move on.
You win that handily. I'm never gonna beat you in arm wrestling, and I knew it going into that.
You're winning in vomits after we run too.
I am. I'm winning in all the categories that matter. I'm there, man. It's good weight loss right there. So, this is an interesting episode. I'm just gonna let the users know.
Let's just jump right into this.
Let's jump right in.
How do you deliver bad news?
No, let's not go bad news first.
Okay, good
news.
Let's
go good news
okay,
first, Chris.
Good news.
We reached a milestone today. Our last episode was on the nostalgia of the 1980s.
And how you
Emat.
cry when things are sentimental to you.
Do you want to sing John Denver with me? Take me home? You want to do it? Can you give me a beat? No. But we talked about that. We talked about Reader's Digest and the fact that I grew up in my grandmom's house reading Reader's Digest. Well, we had a fan who gave us, if you're on YouTube, you can see it. I am holding in my hands the July 1976 edition of Reader's Digest. So I show up on Monday this week, no lie.
Yep.
And there is a little shipment, I don't know, some came in via mail, and I'm like, what is this? I cut it open, and imagine my surprise when I open up Reader's Digest 1976. I don't actually know who this is from.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what name was on the package.
It was an eBay seller. So that was my first thought, right? I'm going to go
we know a couple of eBay sellers.
We do know a couple of eBay sellers, but that's pretty sure that's not who this came from. I already checked with said eBay seller, and that person did not. So I don't know, but whoever our fan was that did this, I want you to know you made my day, made my week. It's going to go on a LinkedIn post tomorrow, and now it's going to be featured prominently in the episode.
It might be framed.
So, Chris, there's some really great stuff in here, just bringing you back in time like a time capsule.
So let's walk through this a little bit.
Let's walk through it.
How would you describe Reader's Digest? Because I would say maybe half of the people who might be listening to our podcast know what a Reader's Digest is. So
a Reader's Digest, it's a collection of probably anywhere from 4 to, it's like a magazine, but a magazine I would say that doesn't have a sole focus like that it's built around. Like, Sports Illustrated is built around sports. Let's say that something like Stream and Field or Field and Stream, built around fishing. Something like Nintendo Magazine built around Nintendo. Reader's Digest is really built around readers. So it's really like a collection of short stories. I'd say everyone's between 3 and 5 pages. And it can be about all sorts of topics. So for instance, give you a couple of them.
Just let's go. What would we have read in 1977?
Montreal. Is it the last of the big Olympics?
Oh.
So I was born, I know it was not. We had some pretty big Olympics after that. Salt Lake City, Atlanta, definitely not. But it's cool that they thought so. This one will get your goat. The Deadly Move to the Sea, which is a story about how in 1976 people are fleeing from urban cities and going to suburban areas. Apparently that was the talk of the town in 1976. There's another one in here that I thought was really funny.
You said that I think you would flip to the back for some humor. Is there any humor in this one?
I did. You ready for this?
Yeah, let's
Laughter,
go.
the best medicine is what I used to listen for. So here we go. The audience can
According to 1977, let's go.
Probably totally inappropriate. Do not hold us responsible. You can contact Reader's Digest if the editors are still alive. So, during a speech before a U.S. women's club, the Latin American diplomat was describing his country. Our most popular sport is bullfighting, he said. One matron, obviously upset at the thought of so bloody a spectacle, asked, "But isn't it revolting?" "No," said the diplomat. "That's our second most popular sport." Miss Producer's lost. She didn't get it. Everybody else out there, you can think about that a little bit. You'll get it. I don't know. Given some of the stuff that's going on in Nicaragua and other places now, maybe that's not so good.
There have been some revolts around here too.
This is true. Here we go. A man who had been married for 10 years was consulting a marriage counselor. When I was first married, I was very happy. I'd come home from a hard day at the shop and my little dog would race around barking, and my wife would bring me my slippers. Now everything's changed. When I come home, my dog brings me my slippers and my wife barks at me. I don't know what you're complaining about, said the counselor. You're still getting the same service.
You're getting the same service. That is right.
That's you're going to get married in a little while. You can. Is that what you had in mind?
She's going to buy a dog. She's going to get him a dog.
Move on. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, this is kind of funny. Letter from camp. Dear Mom and Dad, what is an epidemic? Love, Junior. Wow, in the face of what actually happened the last 2 years. That's kind of funny. So yeah, Reader's Digest, I'm going to read all of this. Oh, here's another. The porno plague. I don't know what that's.
That's where we stop. Yep.
So Reader's Digest, 1976. Thanks to one of our viewers.
What month again?
July.
If you're interested, you can go find it on eBay.
That's 200 years from 1776, if you're curious.
So whoever sent that to us, thanks. That was fun.
It was fun. The other thing that we're dealing with today, the readers, if we feel a bit thrown off,
boy. Yeah.
and it's funny because she's flashing the 5-minute warning at us now, because this is the second time we shot this episode.
So that was the good news.
The good news was the Reader's Digest.
So we start with humor whenever you're going to do good. Yeah. So this is good. This is good for like project managers and stuff like that.
Now we have to have public browbeating, public shaming. Yes, absolutely.
Shame.
So we shot this episode, in all fairness, quite a while ago. It was probably, I'd say, easily top 10 on our episode list.
Probably. I'd say maybe top 5.
Top 5. Yeah,
it was at least top 5. I got to harass you about not taking your son fishing when you took him camping. Like, what dad doesn't take their son fishing during a camping trip? This guy apparently does it.
So. All lost.
Maybe we do need to get a Field and Stream.
And my brother grew up with that. Somebody else wants to send us Field and Stream, like early 1980s. I'll take that as well. But now we're reshooting it because gasp. Miss Producer emails us yesterday that she lost all the footage for our top 10 episodes.
Top 5
episodes.
Like Booker T, top 5 out of 9.
Agreed, top 5 out of 9 episodes. And she's like, we have to redo this thing. So we're gonna have to reimagine what we talked about a month ago, and make it fit within the context of the 2 episodes that it's sandwiched around.
Yeah, but
and this mosquito is bothering
what's
me.
awkward is how appropriate this situation is on the subject, because we're talking about ILI. and if I frame this a little bit, if I may. So we have the intro that was still fully intact.
Yep.
We have the break that was still fully intact. And we have the second half of the show that was still fully
intact. This fly is gonna die, or I'm gonna die. Something is gonna happen. One of us, I'm gonna go tumbling out of the chair.
Next thing we're gonna get is a fly swatter.
It's ridiculous. So we lost parts of the episode.
So we have 3 parts of 4.
So let me ask you a question, Chris.
So does that pass for first run success?
Do we? She has a 90% first run success rate because we've gotten 9 out of 10. The question is, do we need to rerun?
Yeah, do we reshoot this? Or do we just miss the first half that was missing?
And then change clothes in the middle and people are confused in the broadcast. The Easter egg has moved. This is really a perfect segue. Let's jump into it. So that's a good segue, actually, and I'm sure we're going to come back to that. Do you need to rerun? Do you need to re-inspect after the findings of your Emat DQA? And we do forgive Miss Producer. She's done a fabulous job.
Hey,
I'm sure it was something. If she
like
do a better job,
it's like
she can get rid of this fly that is plaguing me. I wonder if she sent it.
It's partnership.
It's partnership,
right? You got to trust the people you work with. There's always a
the audience is so confused. So last time we left off, it was Emat, Take Me Home, Country Roads. It was everything pre-inspection, Chris.
Yeah, it was. We talked about the ILI system.
Yep.
We talked
the
about
measurement principle.
Coming up to it and running the pig. The measurement principle. And this one was titled Catch and Release.
Originally titled Catch and Release, right? But we have no real evidence to support that any longer because we've lost that.
But I think it's still fair.
We
Catch and Release.
think it was
you've caught the pig. And I think what did we say? We were going to release the hounds.
Yeah, release the hounds.
The idea there was, it's like, what do you do next? Like, you want to be tactical in what you want to do, and not just, go out on a wild goose hunt.
So let's start from the very beginning, Chris.
Yeah.
When operators do Emat, I find it's really funny. Yeah. The first document they receive is a DQA or DQR, which is a data quality assessment or a data quality report.
Yep.
If operators do get that, what should they be looking for? Let's just go straight into it. And I want to say, there are some operators who do not get a DQA or DQR, I think because of how they are influenced from running MFL and other things. Maybe that historical carryover, but assuming that they run and they're getting a DQA, DQR, what should they be looking for?
So my first comment to that is, I hope you defined it as an operator. So part of your pre-assessment activities or pre-planning activities is you should already have a defined scope for what you want to receive as it relates to field report, which would be things like sensor coverage, amount of data collected, velocity charts. And then second is what we're going to call a data quality assessment, right? And a data quality assessment it has the key word in there, right? Data. And the idea there is, it's at some point, once the data is downloaded, it goes to an analyst, and the analyst is able to define what the quality of that data set is. And so ideally, I think the first takeaway is you want to be sure you define that, right? You want to know what you want from the field, what you want from the data analyst, so that you know if you can use the data and how. And it kind of makes me feel like we need to put some process control in here for Miss Producer. After every run of these shows, we need to ask for a field report that the data was collected, the video was collected,
is the quality
and it's
acceptable,
stored properly so we don't lose it in transit.
Is the audio there? Absolutely right. This is good. So it was a failure on our part for not having an appropriate process in place.
Bingo.
To ensure that Miss Producer would do her job.
Because ultimately the operator is responsible for the integrity assessment, right?
You're right. You're well done. So in that DQA, though, I think Emat sometimes looks a little bit different, right? I mean, operators.
This might be our last episode if we keep on this whole Miss Producer
Well, we don't have to come back for a while anyway, so we're going to give her a break. But she loses the next two, then we do have a problem. By the way, Miss Producer, make a note. We need to check and make sure we have the files for the next two episodes. In that DQR, Chris, I think so. In MFL, operators are looking and saying, "Hey, did I have a number of sensors that were functional?" MFL, while being speed sensitive, typically there's degraded specifications for if you had speed excursions. What types of things are operators looking for in a DQA for Emat? How is it different? Let me ask you the question: is it different?
Yeah, I think a lot of the principles are the same. I think what you're looking for is degraded data. And a natural step most of our audience's experience in ILI is you ask your service provider, what is the extent of that degradation and can the data still be used? And I think that's a little bit of a conversation, right? So if the analyst says, hey, here's how the performance specification is now modified as a result of this data degradation, then you have to understand what that means for your integrity assessment, right? If you're having to add 30% to all your depths, that may be a deal breaker. Yeah. But if that's only for a specific segment of that overall inspection, then that may be something you can deal with complementary integrity assessments, like maybe an SCCDA or direct examination, something like a CDA, something like that.
Right. So if I lost data or I had degraded data in an area, is there another assessment that I can use to make up for that? That's the question you're trying to answer.
Those are examples. The other thing I think you wanna look at is there's a lot of stuff you can learn from the field too, right? So if you have a velocity plot, we know that from our previous episode that ultrasonic technologies, including Emat in this case, can be much more sensitive or susceptible to data degradation when it's related to velocity excursions. So those are things that you can screen on the early end. Also debris. So you catch the trap, you catch the tool in the trap, and it comes out with a bunch of crud on it.
If you catch the MFLC first, because that's what you were running, and it comes out, that is a very clear warning sign of whether or not you need a more aggressive cleaning program. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a sign that we saw missed, Chris, I think a lot of times, was we'd get an we'd get an Emat report back that failed due to debris, and we'd start asking questions, and it turns out that the MFLC was very heavily coded, and it just wasn't noted. It's like the Emat went along, without really paying attention to that. Let me ask you another question on that. Yeah. Should operators?
I'm gonna
that fly, dude. If you have to smack me, do it. My gosh, that fly is all over me. Now you're just having fun. Go sit your orange butt down. You're going to ruin the Reader's Digest magazine.
You can't make this stuff up, guys. I'm sorry.
He's in rare form,
hilarious.
guys. Should operators consider separating the seam and the pipe body when they look at the DQA for an Emat?
I think it depends, right? Yeah. So when you look at an inline inspection system, you should be defining the goals for it. We've talked about that as well, right? And so if you're looking for pipe body SCC, well, then that kind of defines the scope of the data set that you're looking for. If you have, in this case, let's say it's a gas line and you're looking at 192.917 for, seam susceptibility, that type stuff, then yeah, you're gonna have to pay attention to the long seam, and all those things play a factor. So it all goes back to understanding what you're trying to achieve and setting the goals for the inspection.
So when we talk about setting the goals, one of the things you mentioned, I thought it was interesting, it brought back memories for me, was when you talk about wall thickness changes and looking at the speeds plots. Because the goal of the DQA is ultimately determined, should we make a rerun? Should we reshoot the episode?
Should we reshoot it?
In our case, I mean, it was total loss of data.
It was just the only first half.
You know what? We should put both episodes out there for operators and be like, did you enjoy the last half where you just jumped in and see what happened? But no, in all seriousness, when you're making that decision, one of the things that we learned is you have to look at whether or not the data loss is something that could be fixed. Yeah. Right? So we had several cases where when you got into why the data was lost, it was something intrinsic to the system. Yep. So for instance, we would see speed changes or speed excursions very closely tied to wall thickness changes, which unless they were prepared to replace that section of the pipeline, you're not going to be able to fix. So that fly is just, I know. At the break,
we need to name the fly.
At the break, we are taking care of the fly. Rosie the fly. So, I like that. Now she's just perched on the mic. She's come back around.
Did you say my name?
Yeah. So
about DQAs, I think something that's pretty valuable is and every operator can get it differently, and I think different service providers may be able to present it differently. But some tips. For sure, you want to understand what the data quality is on a joint-by-joint basis.
Yes, not holistically, right? Not saying, hey, I have 95% coverage or 98% coverage there, I'm good.
You want to understand on a joint-by-joint basis what that data quality assessment's telling you. And as an operator, a couple of things that you can have ready for integration is understanding where your areas of susceptibility are, and also where your areas of consequence are. And so that allows you to do a risk-based approach in understanding if you can accept the data and why. It also helps you understand a little bit as to if you're going to supplement that data with another data set, you can kind of hone in and see if that's going to be practical or not. Just a couple of tips on the DQA.
So actually, this makes us a good segue, because I want to go next into the question of preliminary reports, which is always a hot topic. But before we do that, we're going to turn it over, take a break for our sponsors while I try and kill a fly. Where is it?
Hi, I'm Kara Turner. I am the Managing Director and co-founder of ADV Marketing. We get the honor of working with Rhett and Christopher to produce this crazy podcast, and also work with them on any other initiatives that they have when it comes to marketing. And if you know them or are listening to this podcast, you know that it gets pretty crazy around here. So we have a lot of fun with them. ADV Marketing is a full-service business-to-business marketing agency. We specialize in service companies and technology companies. So if you are enjoying listening to this podcast and the fun that they're having, reach out to us and see how we can make your marketing fun.
All right, welcome back to Pipeline Things, Thing 20, Thing 21, and our unwelcome guest, Rosie the Fly.
And everyone's wondering, Rhett did not get Rosie the Fly.
No, I did. I missed twice.
Rosie 2, Rhett 0.
Yeah. Oh, stupid fly. So Chris, let's keep going on this this discussion, right? I'm enjoying it, because this is one of my favorite ones, which is now that we've gotten the DQA, let's assume we cleared that hurdle, and now we're looking at the next step. Yeah. Which actually, this is where we see, I'm going to say, a lot of variation among operators. Yep. And I think maybe things look very different from MFL, depending potentially on what you're going to do. Yeah. So in your mind, Chris, if you're getting an Emat run, what's the next report or next milestone from you from the vendor?
So we got the field report. Everything looks good.
DQA. That's what you keep saying. Field report. DQA.
Yeah, field you get, and then I get the DQA, and all the data looks good, and we can move forward. You want to understand, again, I'm going to go back to this, you want to define the objective of the inspection. And I think that all has to be integrated into your risk profile and your risk tolerance. Generally,
the objective is I want to find cracks, buddy.
Generally,
in fact, I want to find every crack.
What we see is that it's often more efficient and more pragmatic to just receive a draft final and not create a separation in the analysis or an additional deliverable of a preliminary report.
So you just say that one more time.
We jump straight to the draft final and bypass a preliminary report.
So now I think most of our listeners are familiar with preliminary.
Yep.
They're familiar with final.
Yep.
I'm betting there's a whole bunch of them that are not familiar with the term draft final.
Did you just introduce a new terminology? I don't think so.
I think you did.
I don't know. Let's say it this way. Preliminary reports have their function. Back in the 2000s, what we found is its preliminary reports related to Emats were very functional. It was around using efforts towards calibration, improving POI, improving sizing models, and Emat has come a long way since. Now, not every Emat ILI system has the same level of maturity. My particular experience at Rosen, that's mine, is that we've had a lot of great Emat users groups, a lot of good customers that have provided feedback loops, a lot of opportunities to understand what the technology can do. And one of the things we think we find is that preliminary reports need to be very intentional. And I think that from a traditional perspective, draft finals are an efficient way to allow the analyst to get through the data and communicate a complete data set to the operator to allow for data integration processes to begin.
All right. Now, let me question you on that.
Sure.
Again, preliminary reports for traditional tools are typically response criteria driven.
Yep.
100%, right? I want to know my dense with metal loss. I want to know my 80%ers. I want to know everything you can get me before I have to wait 90 or how many days it is from the final report.
Yeah.
And that's a largely discovery driven now. You described something very different for the objective of a preliminary report in the early days of Emat. And then you still yet, I would say, describe something altogether different at the end. What does it mean to be intentional? What does an intentional preliminary report look like?
There could be a couple of things. Let's say I'm gonna go two ways. Let's say you're dealing with an essential variable change, and you want to verify through a field investigation that the tool is operating the way it's supposed to. Essential variable change, i.e., let's say the wall thickness is maybe a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner in a specific area. So you're like, you know what? There's a high consequence area here. There is something that may be impacting one of your essential variable parameters. We want to go on ahead before too long and do some verification information there. Please prioritize that effort. See, again, it's still kind of towards calibration and understanding if the ILI tool performed. That's one way of being intentional. Another way to be intentional is that let's say that you have a cracking problem on a pipeline, and you know that through data integration that you have the material properties and a susceptible environment in a location of high consequence, and you're concerned about the integrity of that pipe. You want to focus on a very specific part of that asset. So you would say, first and foremost, jump to this segment of pipe and look for features that meet these criteria in this section of pipe. So those are very intentional preliminary reports versus it being a broader deliverable.
Yeah, that's not something that somebody's going to do if you're running 30 inspections or 40 inspections a year, unless you have something unique to a system.
Or even 3. It's the context of when you introduce preliminary reports, it can create inefficiencies in the process, and you don't end up getting a more comprehensive or holistic understanding of what's going on the pipeline.
So I think what's interesting about that, I want to take that into layman's terms out there for people, because I think people are maybe even still a bit confused. Let's talk about some of the negative sides we saw from preliminary reporting in Emats. And I want to talk plainly, is if the operator wasn't specific in what they were requesting and left it up to the analyst. By specific, I mean the MFL ones are specific. I want greater than 80%. I want dense with metal loss. If they leave it up to the analyst to determine what features go into the preliminary report, the analyst is going to put maybe what they think is deepest, maybe what they think is important, maybe what they think is unique, which could bear no resemblance to the operator's objectives. That's one problem. And the way we'd see this come about is I think operators had an understanding. A lot of operators also, I don't think, understood when depth sizing took place in the whole Emat evaluation scheme, right? So Sean Moran, when he's on, talked about the fact that it's blobs of data.
Yeah.
It is completely unlike MFL, where MFL, you look at the signal amplitude and you can pretty easily determine what's deeper. And Emat, that's not the only thing that goes into it, which makes it difficult.
It's a complex evaluation.
It is a complex evaluation.
It's a more that's the way I just want to say
this one's darker red, it's worse.
Yes, it is a more complex evaluation protocol.
And the problem with that is that if you cut it short and you say, hey, give me features at the preliminary stage, I think operators expect that they've gotten features that are the deepest. They expect that they've gotten features that are the worst, which may not be the case at all. So, and then when they do get their final report, they're like, well, why was I digging that 40%er if there was a 65%er here?
Yeah. So a couple of takeaways from this. Number one is I think the takeaway is engage in a conversation with your service provider to understand what is common practice and ask questions as to why that's common practice. And then that allows you to make decisions for what your reporting requirements will be.
Agreed.
So again, what obviously I tried to do here is a little bit is it say, hey, let's just jump straight to a draft final. And there's some reasons for that.
Yeah.
And I'll describe a couple. For example, a lot of times the objective of a prelim report is to identify all immediate features because you wanna be risk conscious. And so what we need to understand is if a specific service provider is analyzing that data joint by joint and it's not a global feature search, then what's happening is as they're finding them, they're sending you information. And if that process is going to happen through 3 or 4 months or 120 to 150 days, every week or every 2 weeks, you could be getting a notification, which is something you want or maybe something you don't want.
It's true.
And so then what you're really doing is saying, hey, package it all up into what's called a prelim. Well, then what's happening is you're having them focus on a very specific deliverable, and now they have to come back to the overall analysis. And so the question to be had there is what true benefit is there to a prelim report versus just throwing this global response to it as pipeline safety, right? That can be kind of subjective, and I think that's just what we're trying to highlight.
I'm wondering if we should have a prelim report on the show. Like, should we get the show at a certain point in time to make sure that everything was there in case we need to reshoot it? Or okay. You know what else I've noticed? We lost a guest.
I actually think we could get this to fly with just a really good DQA.
I don't think the fly is missing. Did you notice it's not here? I didn't kill it, clearly.
I think Miss Producer took care of it.
You think so?
I think so. She was doing some kind of thing over there.
Some black magic voodoo over there? Sorry to go with black magic.
We did just come back from New Orleans, so
it's true.
Maybe.
So, all right, then you mentioned a draft final. In your mind, describe for the audience what, because I don't think most people are familiar with that.
Sure.
What's a draft final, Chris? And what's the difference from a final?
I think the intent, the way I would describe a draft final is the analyst has performed all of their normal standard evaluation protocols, and they've evaluated the line from launcher to receiver, and they've considered all variables that would be considered common practice in their evaluation protocol. So the report that you were getting should be comprehensive enough to all reportable features. And the reason why I think we call it a draft is
I would say all reportable features based on the current information that you have on the line, right? And I want to say that was what was going to feed into draft. It doesn't mean that your final will never change. I don't want people to hear that.
Yes.
But it means that you have a comprehensive set of information upon which you can base your excavations. And if you
response, let's call it that way.
Your response is actually a much better term. Yeah. And if your response dictates that you're finding other things in the field, that very well could still result in a changed final report, either in terms of sizing or potentially even in new features.
And we'll classify that process as a blanket statement of data integration. So once you receive the information from your ILI vendor, then what you end up getting to do is, in API RP 1176 does a great job of this, is it encourages a process of data integration. So once you receive the final report, it'll have the ILI nomenclature in it with the characterization of all the features, and then you go and do a data integration process, where what 1176 offers is to classify them as likely, possible, or unlikely cracks, and the current version of it, and we know it's being reworked, also includes some form of time dependency to establish what a response criteria is.
No, that's good. So you're bleeding naturally into response criteria, and I kind of want to chat about that a little bit, because I think that's another really big one, right? That's a big unknown. So as of today, this day we're shooting the show, and even I would venture to say, I bet the day that this show drops, which is in a couple days, assuming the data is not lost, then we, she loves me. I'll give her a Snickers bar when we're done. We're totally
You still
good.
have some.
I might even give her the Snickers bar with the almonds. We'll see. I mean,
No, those are special, buddy. I only gave you 5 of those.
I know, and I already gave 2 to Billy, but it's because Billy was pretty nice. So, RIN 2 of the updated gas rule has still not dropped.
Yep.
There's proposed language or theoretical language from AGA, but there's a lot of questions around there around what response criteria should be. And we even mentioned response criteria earlier. How would what recommendations, Chris? Let's get into what would you want to convey to our audience about response criteria for Emat?
Yeah, I think the message.
I caught you off guard. I can tell you're not ready.
No, it's not that I'm not ready.
You have the confused look on your face.
I think that you have to be careful when you navigate this, because we have what I'm going to call API RP 1176 is kind of like a consensus document.
Yeah.
It's where you have consultants, industry stakeholders, SMEs, operators all coming together and saying that from a process, methodical, technical perspective, this is how we should be managing cracks in pipelines.
Right.
And then we have regulation, which
says this is how you
today can be very prescriptive.
Yes.
And so the fact of the matter is that while our regulators are open to alternate procedures through no objection processes, if you have a prescriptive requirement, then you have to address it. However, I do think the message that can be communicated is that I think FIMS on multiple occasions over the last couple of years now has communicated that they're open to this concept of a no objection. If you submit a process to them, an alternate process, they're happy to walk through that and understand it's something that they can be amicable to.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that was like a presidential debate style answer. Like you kind of gave an answer and then you kind of evaded at the same time, which is pretty great. I feel like you I don't use grandstanding, but it was pretty great. Okay. So let's look at it a little bit differently, and then we're going to get into this in the next episode where we talk about scenarios.
Yeah.
Right. But let me say so much: what information do operators need to be prepared to have to develop response criteria?
That is a good one.
So let's go there, right? Because operators are going to develop response criteria, and it's not just going to be depth-based.
Yep.
It's going to be based on burst pressures, which is going to lead into something that a lot of operators are more challenged by in the crack world.
Yep.
Right. And so what advice, let's go with that. What advice do you want to give operators who need to develop response criteria for crack tools?
So at Rosen, when we developed the crack framework, I think one of the important steps that we put in place was the pre-inspection assessment, where you would engage your customer and ask them, what is your understanding of material properties?
Rosie's
Ooh,
back.
I see it. Don't you dare.
Yes,
That's pretty close.
Hold steady.
If you better get it. You totally missed again. We would question if they had a preference to which fracture mechanics model they wanted to use, and we also asked them about their understanding or the current status of their material properties verification.
And again, that's probably a whole separate episode, but man, that's kind of, nobody really likes talking about fracture mechanics. It's boring. Maybe other than like Ted Anderson and a few people who are really well known in the industry that would probably love to have a beer and sit down and argue about fracture mechanics models. Nobody else really probably does. I think the truth is,
but there's a big takeaway here, right?
Which is you need to be prepared before you run the tool.
Yes,
right?
You need to understand what model you're going to use and what your material properties are going to be.
If you have the material properties to support the model.
Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to result to defaults, get a number of reported features that you've now recently discovered, and you're caught in a situation where operationally you might not be able to defend that the pipe has the integrity it needs to operate at that pressure for that amount of time.
Yeah.
And so that is a big takeaway, I think, from this discussion.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the things that we're going to communicate to you guys. If you guys do engage us to support you with these type projects, some of our initial discussions are going to be, what do you know about your material properties?
Real life conversation, right? This happened to us the other week on a call with an operator who was running Emat, and we got into a conversation about the response criteria we were talking about. And I said, what material information do you have available? And the answer was common. We have Sharpies from a lot of the cutouts that we've done. I could probably count on hands and toes the number of operators who have given us that answer, quite common. And I said, okay, how reflective are those of the populations that we're going to be assessing, right? Which is that gets a blank stare, right? Like, because you have to, those Sharpies may not be applicable for every pipe in that line. That's question number one. Then question number two was they came back and they said, well, Rhett, how much data do we need? And that's where I said, well, if we're being honest, we got a 607 question on our hands. I say, because the truth is, you need Sharpies to perform your fracture mechanics assessments or your burst pressure calculations. And you need TVC Sharpies. So you need to be thinking, my question to you is, where are Sharpies in your TVC and your 607 program for both the pipe body and the long seam? That was like, you could hear a pin drop after I made that. And that's quite a common conversation.
It is, and there's a,
because it's a big ask.
And there's a second order value there. So when you're selecting your ILI system for the inspection, specifically a tool and its configuration, if you don't have a full appreciation of the attributes of your pipeline, then you might end up finding out the system's performance after the fact. And it's always better to be able to communicate to your ILI service provider, whomever that may be, the how your pipeline is made up and what they should expect from a properties and an attribute perspective.
Because what you don't want to have happen again, and we've seen that, you run it, and it's kind of funny that both of those compressors kicked on at the same time. It's almost like they want to be heard. You run it, and then you find out that the Emat inspection threshold is below what your properties would support for critical flaw sizes. That's a bad day. And those are the types of things you want to be in front of with your materials, in front of with your failure model.
So that's another great point that we made there, right? So a part of your ILI system selection, and again, this is one of the things that we often promote in different workflows when we're working with a customer to establish pre-inspection activities and post-inspection activities, and a lot of the service providers, ILI service providers, also engage in these activities. So ask questions, ask for help, they can help. It's establishing critical flaw curves before you deploy the inspection so that you can understand what the tool performance specs are against your critical flaw curve. That way you know going into getting your report what type features you should expect to have to respond to and what type features you might be able to detect.
You know what? I don't know if we covered everything from our last episode. There's no way to know because the data was lost.
It's gone.
But I feel like this was a worthwhile rerun, Chris.
I think it was fun. And we had a featured guest.
We did. Rosie is gone again.
Did you call it Rosie? Rosie.
Yeah, I don't know where Rosie is.
Rosie survived.
I hope she flies straight into a wall and perishes. Or gets eaten by a bird. Or if we have bats in here, I'm fine with that too. But I think this is a good place to end. One last question. In 1976, how much do you think a Reader's Digest cost? I mean, a magazine today is what, $5-6? That comic book you bought me was probably $3 or $4.
15 cents.
75.
Oh, inflation.
All right. So you know what? Actually, it's a repeat because we're dealing with inflation today, and this was like in the height of stagflation. I know you didn't mean that, and if you don't know what stagflation is
just Google it.
Just Google it. On that note, man, we've really enjoyed, Chris. I've enjoyed being with you. Miss Producer, we forgive you and we love you. Don't let it happen again, please. And we look forward to being with you next week, where next week we're going to continue to get into the subject of Emat. We're going to talk about some what-if scenarios. It'll be another enjoyable episode. Thank you for joining Thing 20 and Thing 21 on today's edition of Pipeline Things, and we will see you in 2 weeks. There I go.
I did just see it.
Do I stink?
Oh, it's on me.
It's on me. It's transferred here.
Give me the Reader's Digest. No, I'll do it. You're gonna miss. You're gonna miss.
I did. I missed.